what I mean. I shoot my shot and it's clean. This from my city, yeah, this from my team. If you talking, it's how to be nice. I play with all of my life. You see my name in the lights. Better get right, I'm champion. The game is in trouble. I've been in my depth for the piece of the puzzle. I got it for real.
So introducing Wade Schalles, PIAA state champ, two-time NCAA champ. And what else can I fill in the blank with there? Author, right?
Collegiate world champion, National Wrestling, distinguished member of National Wrestling Hall of Fame, father of funk wrestling. You're
the original funk master, right?
Well, yeah, I remember we talked about it.
The
term funk is mine. I made that up.
Yeah. The Grandmaster Flash has nothing on you, right? You are the original funk master. I love it. And we'll get into that. We'll get into that, obviously. But back to, where it all started for you. I think you had mentioned that you started in, was it 9th grade you started wrestling?
Yes, that's correct.
And how'd you get involved? Tell me a little bit about that.
Try to get set up. So we're going now. So you're going to cut and slice?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Well, hey,
we are good. We are good, brother.
Okay. So you want to know how I got started?
Yes. How did the great Wade Schalles, how did he get involved in wrestling? How was he introduced to it?
Well, I had a neighbor across the street that I ran around with a lot. He went out and became a manager on the wrestling team. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come on out?" Because we always hung out together. And I went, "Okay." Wasn't sure about wrestling, but
hey, let me stop you for a quick second. What is a manager of a wrestling team?
A guy that picks up packs the bags when you travel and does the thing, does whatever coach wants you to do.
I got you. Okay. So that was a friend of yours? He was your age, or?
He was a year older than I was. He was my best friend across the street from where I grew up.
Gotcha.
And so I thought, well, but when I was younger, I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood. And within a 4 or 5 block radius of my home, if I was going to have any friends whatsoever, they were all older than I was, 2, 3 years older than I was. And so I had to chum around with the older guys, and they didn't want the snot-nosed little kid hanging out with them. And, when we were riding bicycles, I had a 16-inch bicycle. They had a 20-inch bicycle. So I had to pedal harder to keep up with them. When they graduated from a 20 to a 26-inch bike, I graduated to a 20-inch bike. So I'm still trying to catch up.
Right.
When I did catch up with them and I wanted to play kickball or whatever the heck they were doing, they would knock me down and try to, dissuade me from hanging out with them. Go back home. And and I was just stubborn enough I wouldn't. And then, someone would try to push me down, and next thing you know, I'd end up on top in a headlock, and then they were looking at me like, who is this little guy? And then the more they tried to push me around, the more I ended up on top of them. And when they realized, well, we don't like the little guy, but little son of a bitch is tough,
He's a little pit bull.
Yeah. So that, I didn't look like it. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I lived in the town of Hollidaysburg. And
where is that? Where is Hollidaysburg?
It's about an hour and a half west of State College, Penn State.
Okay.
Altoona is right. Altoona and Hollidaysburg is the same, basically.
Gotcha.
Right at the base of the Allegheny Mountains. Well, anyhow, a lot of outdoor activities, hunting, fishing, and so on. It was a nice place to grow up. So anyhow, I hung out with these guys, and they kind of allowed me. They didn't like me, but they respected me. So I guess I was accepted in among the crowd. And so then I thought, when my neighbor across the street said, "Why don't you come out for wrestling?" Wow, I do end up on top a lot. Yeah, why don't I give it a try? So I came out for wrestling in the junior high. Now, there's so many things that are different today than is, back then versus today. When you say, who was the greatest wrestler of all? Can you say Starucci now from Penn State, if I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Starachi.
Starachi, 5-time NCAA champ. Great. But how do you compare him with Danny Hodge, who has 3 titles? But Danny was only allowed to have 3 titles. Freshmen weren't eligible. We didn't have COVID back in the 50s when Danny wrestled, so he didn't get an extra year. So, yeah, he only had 3 times, but they were in the same weight class. I don't think Starachi would survive against Danny Hodge. But I'm sure some of the younger crowd listening to this go, wait, come on. Well, then you don't know anything about Danny Hodge. I mean, he was 43-0, I think. In 3 years of wrestling, he had a total of 43 matches. I think he pinned 39 of them.
Wow.
So he has the greatest pin to win ratio in the NCAA history. And that's why the award, the Hodge Award, is named after Danny. Excuse me.
You're a popular guy.
God damn it. Yes, hello.
Life happens, right, Wade? It's all good, man. It's all good.
Yeah, well, that's how So, and then up through 1970, all the wrestlers only had 3 titles. So when Pat Smith won his 4th title, and everyone said, "Wow, he's the first 4-timer." Well, yeah, he was. I didn't think he was good, but I don't put him up there as one of the very best. But
I don't think many people do.
But he has 4 titles.
Yeah.
But when you look back prior to 1970, everybody who had 3 titles could very well have had 4 had the NCAA allowed them to wrestle their freshman year. See, up through 1970, freshmen were not eligible at all to wrestle, play basketball, football, whatever. You had 3 years of eligibility in college. So Gray Simons, one of the greatest ever, ex-Lock Haven coach, 4-time NAIA champ, 3-time NCAA champ. I think he lost 2 matches in his career, and I think and he lost him his freshman year, but he was amazing. There were a lot of them that they could have won 4 titles, and Pat would not have been that. 5 titles for Starucci. Okay, 5. He had 5 opportunities. How many 4-timers, would Pat Smith have won a 5th title had he had a 5th year?
Well, Kyle Dake,
oh, sure.
Cal Sanderson, they would have won 5th titles.
And if Starucci was given 2 more years eligibility, he'd have 7.
Sure.
And so would Cale Sanderson or Kyle Dake. Dake is a tough one. If you'd asked me, very seldom does anyone ask me, and I'm getting off topic here in a way, but I think it would be interesting to your viewers. Who are the 5 toughest, in your opinion, Wade? The ones that are, whoa, I won't talk about the ones that people think of that aren't there, because just by naming them and saying I don't think they were that good, I would get a lot of poison pen letters. So I'm just going to mention the ones that I think were right up there. Obviously Kyle Dake is up there. I mean, when he can beat, he had a few, major wins in college, like David Taylor, as an example. He went through, you can't remember, no one can name anybody that Pat Smith beat the NCAA finals. He had no competition. Now, why that was the alignment of the stars, or everybody thought he was that tougher than hell and they got out of his weight class? I don't know, but he didn't have any competition for the most part. Cale Sanderson would be up there with me. I think heavyweight from Pitt Johnstown.
Hasselrig
would be right up there, in my opinion, of one of the greatest heavyweights. The 2 heavyweights that I think clearly, and there's so many, like Lou Bannock, that sucker could wrestle. But I think that Hasselrig and Gable Stevenson were the two best heavies we've had. Chris Taylor would be right in there. I don't know how his size would, whether he would land on top of,
Well, he wouldn't have been eligible to wrestle.
well, he
today.
wouldn't be eligible. So that's another whole thing you throw in there
Sure.
of who's the greatest of all time. Gray Simon, certainly. Danny Hodge, absolutely. Gabe. Gabe during his time was well, I'll just stay off that talk on that. That's
no,
okay.
I think our sport is so unique in era of athletes that I think it's just impossible to name, oh, well, this guy was the greatest of all time. I agree with what you're saying, 5 or 6 guys, and go, these 5 or 6 guys, regardless of era, whether they wrestled in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or today, these are the guys. And, you brought up Kyle Dake, and I agree with you. A guy to win 4 titles in 4 different weight classes, to me, not only just, you mentioned the fact that he beat David Taylor, but I'm saying 4 titles in 4 different weight classes. That's really, really impressive to me, because you could be a 4-timer in 1 or 2 weight classes, but 4 different weight classes to win a title, that to me, and I agree with you, he definitely belongs in the conversation.
Yeah, in any decade, I think if you're going to be honest with and be right about doing something like that, if Win Magazine wanted to do it, I'd pick the best team in each decade. 10 guys in each weight, 10 weight classes in the 90s and the 60s and the 50s and 2010s, and you probably get pretty close. And if you watch the videos of the old timers, like a Gray Simons, he didn't look that impressive. Danny Hodge didn't look that impressive, because the style back then was not an impressive style. It was to take him down, pick up an ankle, beat the hell out of him. It was a lot more physical than it was today, I think. But if you would pull Gray Simons, you could have a magic wand and put him in the room right now, against, some of our best today, Gray would get killed. I mean, we've advanced that much. However, with that being said, if you gave Gray an opportunity to train in that same wrestling room for a year and then squared him off with the other guys, I think Gray would win.
Here's a reverse engineer it. Take a guy today and put him back when Gray Simons wrestled, right?
You don't have the technique, the coaching, you don't have the sports psychiatry, you don't have the nutritional
different
side of it.
Different environment.
You don't have 58 matches a year, Yeah. I mean, Hodge went through a full college career and had 43 matches, but that was a lot back then, Today, if your body will survive it, you got a lot of matches, and you get pretty tough pretty quick, if you survive it. And we've had some great ones, no question about it. But anyhow, so I wrestled in ninth grade. I was 6-2, on varsity in junior high. Because in junior high back then, again, Kerry Colat had more matches by the time he was in 6th grade than I had in my entire high school career. And so
it probably 3rd grade.
When he came up through and won 4 titles and 4 OWs in PA, my God, could he wrestle? He was great. But, how do you compare him to somebody in the 70s or 80s or 90s? Well, he was in the 90s, I think. But
he was,
When you didn't, we're not allowed to wrestle 4 years in varsity. When I was there, you could only wrestle 3 years, 10th, 11th, and 12th, because junior high had their own competition, high school had their own, and 9th graders were not allowed to move up.
Yeah, well, 9th graders weren't part of a high school. A lot of times now, 9th grade is part of the high school. So
yeah, they moved that. And,
different time.
And now even in a lot of states, 8th graders are allowed to move up to varsity if they're good enough. Who was the Afro-American gentleman from Penn State, about 77-pounder from Minnesota? He won 5 state titles.
Hall. What weight?
Hall. Hello,
Hmm. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. That was his name?
Hall. Yeah,
Hall. Okay. Yeah, I don't recognize that name.
he was a two-time NCAA champ for Penn State.
Okay.
But anyhow, he won states in Minnesota as an eighth grader. He was destined for greatness. So anyhow, history. It's interesting to look back, but so many people like Win Magazine last year did a top 100, and I didn't agree with half of them, but see, it's tough too because 28 of the top 100 that they've put in there didn't win one NCAA title. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, but they were world champions. They moved on and either won the Olympics or Worlds, but they didn't win an NCAA title.
28 of the top 100 never won an NCAA title. That's pretty wild.
I think it was 28. Don't hold me. It could be,
Yeah, no worries.
Please don't write me back and say it was only 20.
I don't care if it's 20. Yeah.
And so are we classifying international? Is freestyle like folk style?
Well, they must be if these guys didn't win an NCAA. It couldn't be top collegiate wrestlers of all time. So they must be including post collegiate.
A lot of them didn't win a state high school title either. If you're going to be in the top 100, you're going to have to be a state high school champ. You're going to have to be an NCAA champ, and probably a world champ. Now you're demonstrating that you can adapt. And you were tough the whole way through.
Yep.
So anyhow,
how did you end up at Clarion? What did you look at multiple schools, or was that like?
Well, this goes back to funk.
Uh-oh.
That story. I was a unique, a garbage wrestler. That's what they called me, garbage. You'll never win any big matches. He's just a garbage wrestler. Because I didn't adhere to the rules. The rules or coaching rules back then were single leg, double leg, tight waist, pick up an ankle, drive him down, sit on the leg, and don't move for 2 minutes until the period ends. It was boring wrestling. It drove me crazy. And I went to coach, and he goes, I get up on the guy's head one-on-one, and I'd be up leaning on the back of his head and out the right angle. Coach goes, no, you got to be behind him. I said, why? I didn't want to be a smart ass by saying why, because when you would challenge a coach or a teacher, why do you say that?
Yeah.
You're either smart enough as a coach to go, well, okay, Wade, you're only allowed 3 whys per practice. Okay. But good question. Let me answer that for you, Wade. My coach were going, because I said so. That is never an answer to the question of why,
right?
Because I said so. And I said, well, I'm not a farm boy. I live in Hollidaysburg. The surrounding area, we had a lot of farms, and we had guys coming in with biceps, and chests and that from slinging bales of hay, since they were 3 years old. I wasn't one of them. I was a skinny little kid, and I didn't win one match at weigh-ins. When people would look over at me and go, I got the skinny kid over there.
I lucked out today. I lucked out today.
And so I didn't want, I tried to stand up on the scale and go, and walk like I was jacked. But all my teammates would do is laugh at me when I did that. So I went the other direction. I rounded my shoulder and walked up like I was, nothing,
dragging your leg.
Yeah. Then my opponent would go, I got him, oh boy, okay, fine. But anyhow, I said, Coach, these arms are not the size of those legs. Why am I back here trying to pick up an ankle? I can't pick his leg up. I mean, I can't do it, but if I get up on his head, I can attack his arms, and his arms are a hell of a lot smaller than his legs are. And his hips and his thighs, the middle of his body, that's the core of strength of a human being. I don't want to screw with that. I want to get up there. If I can lay on his neck and his head, I could screw up his thinking a little bit, cut down on his breathing, and I could have a chance of hanging on to the arms, but not the legs. So tell me why. And they couldn't answer that other than to frustrate the shit out of them that I was arguing with them. and I started winning. And after a while, they stopped trying to coach me. They just go, okay, do whatever you want.
Just
So
let
I
him,
would
let,
go,
just let
okay,
him out. It's working.
well, from here, what do I do? Well, maybe if I die, you got my leg up in here. Well, if I die between your legs, I shit them on my back. No, that doesn't work. Okay, how about if I do this? Oh, that worked. And I would start figuring out how to get in and out of things and the slip and slide. And then I was considered, because it was not too normal, it was garbage wrestling. And then for 3 or 4 years, he's never went in college, and he won't go to states. That's garbage wrestling. That doesn't work. That was the common statement that I heard a lot. And the more I heard it, the more it pissed me off, and the more I'll prove them wrong. So maybe they were just throwing gas on my fire, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, but that's what it was.
My guess back then, probably unknowingly.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
You were probably far from textbook wrestling.
Back then, but the textbooks are written today is Wade from back then.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so they said it was garbage wrestling. And after a while, I started winning. I won the states in high school. I pinned the defending state champ who had never lost a match in his life.
Wow.
And that was up and even I think recently, for those who are still around and still alive that watched that match, they listed the Chapman-Schalles match as the most exciting finals match in the history of Pennsylvania wrestling.
Wow.
And it was an exciting match. Halfway through the match, the referee didn't know how to referee funk, and I was getting cheated on points, at least in my opinion. And that of about 8,000 other people, they started throwing coins out on the mat trying to kill the referee.
Wow.
So
take me through that. Take me through that match, if you don't mind.
Oh, hell. He got a double leg on me midway first period, got takedown. And then he rode me out. And then I think it was down 2-0. No,
so 2-0 after one.
It was 2. He got the takedown. And then 30 seconds later, I tried a side roll. And I got to my side. It didn't work. I came back to my base, and the ref went 2, near fall. What? I wasn't even close to near fall. And then the crowd went crazy because, it was just.
So was it 4-0 at that point?
It was 4-0 at the end of the first period.
Okay.
But the fans were booing a lot. And because the takedown was out of bounds. I'm looking at it. It was probably a takedown, but it was questionable enough that the crowd went, and then when the back points, then they were going, this isn't right. So they were booing a lot. And then second period, I was down. I got up, got an escape, and I had during the school year, of course, I came into states 20-0 or 21-0 with 20 pins. So I was pretty well known reputation-wise, statewide, that this kid's skinny, but he could pin people. And so I drove over to Trinity High School in Washington, Pennsylvania from Hollidaysburg, with about a 3-hour drive, to watch Trinity wrestle Cannon McMillan. And Trinity was 10-0, Cannon McMillan was 11-0 in dual meets, and it was the match. So we went over, and I took my little Super 8 movie camera. I was going to take a film of Chapman, because I don't remember. I watched him in his sophomore year win states, but I don't remember him much. And we got there at 6 o'clock for an 8 o'clock start, and the doors were shut. The fire marshal wouldn't let anybody else in. The gym was full at 6 o'clock for an 8 o'clock start.
And how long did you drive?
3 hours.
Oh.
And I'm going, what? I'm complaining at the front door, to the ticket counter, everyone, fire marshal, I need to speak with somebody. I'm livid. And he called the athletic director from Trinity out. And Mr. Smith, I forget his name. And I said, Mr. Smith, I've driven 3 hours to watch this match. My name is, I am there. I want to watch Chapman. I just want to come in for that match. Can you sneak me in for 2 minutes?
You don't care about the rest of the match, right?
Yeah, 6 minutes, in and out. And he said, young man, if you drove for 3 hours to do this to better yourself, I'm an educator. I understand what you're doing, and I'm not going to let them stop you. He said, you're going to be my guest. Now, my coach couldn't come in. He had to sit in the car.
So he came with you.
Yeah, well, he drove. I was,
Yeah.
And so I went in. I'm a little Super 8, and I'm filming the match. He tries a fireman, Chapman tries a fireman's carry, and it doesn't do it really well. And the kid caught him and pulled him back onto his back just for a second. He bridged, got back off, no points. Then he double-legged the guy, put a half Nelson on, pinned him in 58 seconds. So I got 58 seconds of video.
After 3 hours.
Wonderful.
And almost not getting in.
Yeah, wonderful. So when I got back, I would watch that, and so I got an escape in the second period. So it's now 4-1.
Yep.
And I'm going, and I don't want to be on my feet. I mean, if there was an area where I was bad, it was on my feet. I mean, offensively. Defensively, I was pretty good, but on the mat, all right, yeah, top or bottom, that's my area.
Yeah.
And so I'm on my feet going, F me is what I was saying, And what am I going to do now? Then I remembered the video. He did a shitty fireman's carry. So I underhook him and I drive into him. I'm picking him up. I mean, you can't have a better fireman's carry setup, And he tried a fireman's carry. I caught his arm and I pulled him onto his back. And he's bridging on his back and he's sliding across the mat. I get the takedown and then he scoots out of bounds and the ref goes, no points. Well, that did it. The fans erupted, because if I lost 2 points for what I did, I held him on his back closer to his shoulders to the mat at least twice as long as he did me, and I got nothing. So now I've got the takedown. It's 4-3 now, and the crowd is now throwing money out on they were booing him so bad, they were chucking quarters and 50-cent pieces out on the mat.
You probably had to start ducking, so you don't get an eye taken out by a quarter.
They stopped the match, the announcer, ladies and gentlemen, please control your, and then they had to come out with broom and, clean off the mat, all the money,
That is funny.
And they were booing. It was,
that's crazy.
Damn, So that played, I'm sure that played on John Chapman, mentally, he was, because he was now getting booed. I mean, it was.
Sure.
It was just,
even though it wasn't his fault.
No, no,
right?
But you could see he was, what is this? That's never happened to him.
Yeah.
Never lost a match. And then, I was on top in the second period. I cut him loose. Then it was 5-1, and I took him down, and it was 5-3.
And no back, so 5-3.
Yeah. So then third period, I'm on the bottom. I stand up. He picks my leg up, and I'm hopping on one leg, trying to get at him. And he's in the center of the mat with my leg in the air, and he walks me right across the mat and straight out of bounds. No hesitation. I'll just hop, 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 hop out of bounds, And I went to the ref he walked right off the mat and he took me with him. I mean, clear violation. No violation. Mm-hmm. Well, here comes the coins again.
Oh, jeez.
The crowd is going crazy. They want.
So they had to stop. Stop it again.
But it's now they feel like it's not. Schalles is the underdog, and now he's not even getting a fair shot. And so then I stood up again. He picked the leg up. The crowd is still booing, and he sets me down on my butt, and I underhook both his arms, and I'm sitting there, and I'm really good with elevators. And I moved him one way and then the other, and what was the announcer's name? Howard Lopez. And Lopez to his partner said, "What do you think Schalles is doing here?" "Well, it looks like he's trying to elevate him over." "Yeah, he did." And I kicked him over, had him on his back, and the crowd was going crazy. I got the 2. Now it's 5-4. And And I just know I have him in the middle of the mat. He's in the X middle of the mat. And I felt like there's probably 40 seconds left. And I'm going, okay, I'm down 5-4, and he's on his back. He has to give me 2-point near fall. He has to give me a 2-pointer. He should give me a 3-pointer. I didn't think I could pin him, and I'm going, okay, this sucker is not getting off his back. If I have to sink my teeth into him, he's not getting off his back. This match is ending right here like this, and with a 2-pointer or a 3-pointer, I win the match 6-5 or 7-5.
Yeah.
He's not getting up. And I no sooner said that, he's not getting on his back, and the referee slaps the mat. All right, then, I won my foul. Yay. And
wow.
A crowd of people ran onto the mat, picked me up. The referee didn't even get a chance to raise my hand. And they marched me around Rec Hall on the shoulders of people, and the crowd was standing room only, and they were cheering. And it was a match to see. It was some professional, WWE professional guy wrote the script. It had to have been that way, it was just it was an amazing evening, and so
what year was that?
It was my senior year. And
what year?
Oh, 69.
69. Okay.
And they didn't give the OW awards back then, but had they had an OW award, I would have won the Outstanding Wrestler award.
Yep.
And it was a culmination of a great year. And, I ran into a really good coach at the end of my junior year. As it turned out, Gary McCarthy. Gary was the physical director at the YMCA. He started there when I was the end of my sophomore year, or right before my junior year, I think it was. And my mother, said, because I used to work at the YMCA as a physical director with lifeguarding or working Saturday morning with the little kids. And my mother said, hey, you have a new physical director. Go up and introduce yourself. Give him a firm eye contact, firm handshake. Let him know who you are. Welcome him to Hollidaysburg, and be the man that I've trained you to be. Yes, mother. And so I went up and shook hands with him. And I noticed in the back of the office he had a little pair of wrestling shoes. And I went, "You wrestle?" And I could hear it just like it was yes, it was like it was today. And he went, "Well, I dabble in the sport a little bit." "You do?" "Well, I'm a wrestler. You want to wrestle?" And he goes, "No, I'm a head taller than he is, but he's built like a wedge, Yeah. And he said, "I don't have time, son. I got to get ready for class." "You're afraid of me?"
Oops.
Open mouth and short foot. And that got his attention. He went, "All right, get downstairs, pull out the mats." Now they were the old 5x8 foot horsehair mats. You'd pull out and slide them together. That's Resolate didn't exist back then.
Right.
And Warren Tischler hadn't kicked that company into gear yet. And so I went down there, and he came down, and it was about 5 minutes later, which seemed to be about 30 minutes later. I'm laying on my back. I'm bleeding out of the side of my mouth, bleeding out of one of my nostrils. And he's standing over top me. He has one foot on one side of my chest, one foot on the other side of my chest. He's looking down. He's going, "I hate a braggart, but not as much as I love a winner. Do you have what it takes to come back tomorrow?" Now, after the ass kicking I just took, I was afraid to say no. "Okay, good. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., you'll be in this room, mats together, dressed, ready to go. If you're here at 7:03, you're early for tomorrow's practice, for the next day's practice. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir." If I said no, I was probably going to get another beating. I was going to say yes to anything. I went home, told my mother about it. She chuckled. 6 o'clock next morning, she wakes me up. "Come on, you got practice?" "I'm not going." She goes, "Yeah, you are." "No, I'm not." She goes, "You told him you'd be there. That's your word. Your word is your bond. You will be there today. You don't want to go tomorrow? Fine with me. Tell him today. But right now, get your little butt out of bed to the Y."
We're going.
Okay. I go up there, 5 minutes later, I'm on my back again, bleeding out of parts of my body. I didn't know I had parts, standing over me, the bastard again, one foot on one side of my chest, one foot on my other. not bad for a rookie, but do you have what it takes to come back tomorrow? Okay. All summer, I got the shit kicked out of me. I was a head taller and 10 pounds heavier, 15 pounds heavier, but that didn't make it. And I learned a lot of humility. I learned a lot about physical toughness and the mental game. And that set me into my senior year. And I went from a 14-2 varsity junior year. My first year I made varsity was my junior year. I was 14-2. I got upset in the districts, but such as
wrestling. Yeah.
Well, see, it goes back to, again, how tough are you really? Because and where do you rank in, when I wrestled in the 70s, if you lost any match, sectionals, districts, regional, states, you didn't go to states. There was no wrestlebacks. They didn't take the top 3. They didn't take the top 2. You had to win the sectionals to go to the districts. You had to win the districts to go to the regions and so on. There were many a good wrestler that didn't go to states that probably would have won states had they had a second shot, because they screwed up somewhere along the line.
Sure.
Jimmy Carr. He was an Olympian for us out of Pennsylvania. He's out of Erie, the Carr family, Nate, Fletcher, sure. Jimmy, Joe.
Yeah.
Jimmy was a hell of a wrestler. He got beat by Henry Green from Huntington in the regional finals at the Jaffa Mosque in Altoona. And so Henry went on and won the states. No one even knew Jimmy Carr existed. And that summer, he was on the Olympic team.
Crazy, right?
But he didn't go to states. Now, had he gone to states, he probably would have been a state champ. I don't know if Henry could have beaten him 2 times in a row. But who knows? But we have those scenarios. So when you say, Kerry Colat was a 4-timer. Of course, he never lost the match, so I'm not going to equate this to being,
sure.
subpar. But had he lost in the sectionals his 9th grade, just one, he probably would have, got it back in districts. But, those situations, so you have a lot of 2, 3, 4-timers in Pennsylvania or, even the NCAAs. My freshman year at the NCAAs, you had to lose to a finalist if you were going to wrestle back. And then so I lost in the quarters to the defending NCAA runner-up from the previous year, 6-5, my freshman year. Okay. But he got upset in the semis. He's, I'm out of the tournament. Today, everybody is guaranteed 2 matches. You lose a pigtail, you're still in the tournament. That wasn't the way it is. So how many, 4-time All-Americans today look back on somebody who only won 2 All-Americans certificates and go, "Oh, how better you are." Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but you can't judge it that way.
Compare it. Can't compare it. You're playing by 2 different sets of rules.
But so many people don't understand that today. They just think, well, he's 4-time All-American. He was a 2-time All-American, so he's twice as good.
Right.
Not necessarily.
Correct. Agreed.
So we had, that, and I got good to great between my junior and senior year because of Gary and the ass kickings I took every day.
How'd you end up at Clarion?
Right out of college, of course, everybody was talking about the match, State Chapman in the state finals, but I was not heavily recruited because I was a garbage wrestler. And everyone said garbage wrestlers will never win the states, although I did, but they will not survive in college.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, really? Okay. So I was, I took some trips. I took 5, I think you were allowed to have a maximum back then of 5 recruiting trips paid by, the schools. And I took all 5 and I went with my mother drove me to each one of them. We went to Stroudsburg, Lock Haven, Clarion, Pittsburgh, and Penn State. And so my mother met 10 coaches, head coach, assistant coach at each one of those locations. And after I saw all 5, I went, oh my God, they all had something good, and they all, they treated you like gold, and has this to eat, have that, meet Susie, meet Barbara, look at the school, look at the education, look what we do for you, and after a while, when you're a 12th grader, today they can handle that. Back then they, are, today, you know everything by the time you're in 7th grade. Back then it was, you're still wet behind the ears. My mother would go over and go, just put her hand behind my finger behind my head, ear, and go, yep, still wet. Wet behind the ears every time. Every time I thought my poop didn't stink, she'd, no, still wet.
Yep.
Thank you, Mother, for the support. I didn't know where to go. I went, Mom, where would you go? She goes, no. No. I'm not going to tell you anything like that. You have to make this decision, because if you don't like your decision in first semester, you're going to quit by Christmas. And I'm going to say, what the hell? And you're going to say, but you made me go there, Mom. I didn't want to go there. She goes, no, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
That isn't happening. My mother was very smart. And she graduated Carnegie Tech way back in the 30s. And she was something. But anyhow, so I decided to go to Clarion. And then after my first semester, I came back at Christmas time. And
what was the deciding factor of why you chose Clarion? Is there a reason over the other 5? Just curious.
Yeah, it wasn't the schools. I mean, they were all pretty much equal. I mean, Penn State was Penn State. There's
Sure.
Clarion, then there's Penn State.
Sure.
The number, Mom said about Pitt and Penn State, she goes, this has nothing to do with the coaching, the programs, but if you're going to get through, you need a smaller environment. You're going to get lost in Penn State and Pitt. Too many parties, too many things to do, too many big time football games, basketball. You probably, because my grades were not the best, and you're going to have to focus. And I think a smaller school might be better for you. And at the end of freshman year, if you don't like it, you want to pick a big school, transfer.
Sure.
That makes sense. So I chose Stroudsburg because Stroudsburg won the Pennsylvania State Conference that year. So they beat Clarion, Lock Haven, Edinburgh, Bloomsburg, and so on. And they had 2 or 3 All-American, Division I All-Americans. They were tough back then. Red Whitman coaching.
Was Guzzo there? Did Guzzo wrestle at East Stroudsburg?
Yep. Guzzo was there.
Okay.
Eddie Pease, Schumacher, heavyweight All-American. They had a 90-pounder. It was really tough too, an All-American. But they had 4 or 5 All-American, D1 All-Americans. And so that's where I wanted to go. But that was the only school. Lock Haven turned me down academically after the recruiting. Penn State turned me down academically because my grades were not that good. I had 1050 college boards, but my class rank was
right.
Stroudsburg would take me, but it was a 8-week sink or swim program during the summer. They took in 50 students or something like that. And at the end of 8 weeks, whoever had the best 30 grades stayed for the fall, and the other 20 were gone. My mother, during college at Carnegie Tech, dated the president of East Stroudsburg. So she was able to make a phone call on my behalf. Sometimes things happen behind the scenes.
Sure. Sure.
Anyhow, so I had the sink or swim program. So I was there for 1 week at Stroudsburg, and my first trip outside of Pennsylvania, period, was to go to Worland, Wyoming, which was the very first location of Fargo. The Fargo, now called Fargo because it's in Fargo, North Dakota. But before that, it was in Iowa City for many years, about 10 years in Iowa City, Fargo, the Nationals, the USA Wrestling Nationals. But the very first one was in Worland, Wyoming. The publisher, Lanny Bryant of Amateur Wrestling News, it lives in Worland, and he's the one that got the tournament there. And so I went out there representing Pennsylvania. So the second week, I left and went to Wyoming for the Nationals. I came back at the end of that week, and I had a note in my dormitory, go see Dean so-and-so. I went in. He said, Mr. Schalles, where the hell you been? So what do you mean? I said, has Mr. Whitman talked to you? I was at the National Championships representing Stroudsburg in Pennsylvania. He goes, I don't care where you've been. You've been here. You're here for an 8-week sink or swim program, and so far we're 2 weeks into it. You missed a whole week. you've missed 50% of your classes so far. You're not. I talked to your teachers. None of them are going to pass you. So there's no sense of staying. You're already out of here. So, okay. So while I was gone in Stroudsburg, in Wyoming, Penn State came through and got me accepted. And I got my letter at home saying, welcome to Penn State. You've been admitted. And that was my first choice. Because I came back and I said, Mom, look, I got Penn State. She goes, you're not going there because you already committed. You made a commitment. Your commitment is your word. You're going to Stroudsburg. You don't like it at the end of the year. You want to transfer to Penn State? Fine with me, but you're going. Same thing she told me when McCarthy was beating the hell out of me. So when I went up to Stroudsburg and they said, you're out of here, I went, oh, great. Okay, thanks. See you. Bye. Yeah.
Didn't even ask why, right? You're like,
nope, I didn't give a shit. I'm going, hey, Mom, they threw me out. I get to go to Penn State now. She goes, yeah, I guess so, So I called, Coach Cole, Bill Cole down there. And Bill was at a clinic somewhere, and he wasn't there. But Rich Lorenzo, his assistant, who then became the head coach, was there. I said, Rich, Wade Schalles. Oh, hi, Wade, how you doing? Hey, I got a letter here saying I'm accepted to Penn State. Do I still have my scholarship? Because I want to be a Penn State Nittany Lion. He said, you're in school? I said, yeah. He said, what do you got there? I read the letter. He goes, yeah. He said, let me check. I'll be right back with you. I'll call you in 15 minutes. Okay, fine. 15 minutes later, ring, ring. Hey, Wade, Rich Lorenzo. Hey, I'm sorry. Someone sent that letter out, and it's a correct letter, but it should not have been sent out. Someone in the admissions department wanted you to go to Penn State, and they slipped a letter in the mail saying you were in, but you're not in. And now I'm going, uh-oh.
So someone wanted you, like what, a wrestling fan or something, wanted you to.
From the admissions department sent the letter out by mistake.
But it wasn't a real letter.
Signed. So now, okay, I'm out of Stroudsburg. I'm out of Penn State, and I'm number 68 in the draft. 68 in the draft. And if you're under 75, you're going to Vietnam, period. And I'm going, oh, hell. I'm going to either come back with a lot of medals or a lot of holes in my body, with my makeup. And just then the phone rang. And I'm going, Saigon U, here I come. Oh, God.
Saigon U.
Yeah. So, yeah, hello. What? Wade, Neil Turner. Hi, Coach. He said, I understand you're having some trouble. You're having trouble? I just hung up from Lorenzo 30 seconds previously, Yeah. You want to come to Clarion? I certainly do. That's how I got to Clarion. And then when I came home at Christmas, it ended my, freshman year or first semester. I said, hey, Mom, after all this, you had traveled with me to 5 schools and met 10 coaches. And I know you had a preference of where I should go. I said, I'm happy at Clarion. Coach Bub and Coach Turner, I've never met 2 better men as human beings. I mean, they're not the slickest technically. I mean, you could have a Cale Sanderson or something like that, that knows, inside out and upside down. They were solid wrestlers, but they were just great men. The type of person that you had 2 fathers that loved you. And it was just a wonderful feeling up there. And she goes, well, I can tell you now, I met 10 coaches, and the number 1 and the number 2 best people that I met at any school, both were at the same school. And that was at Clarion. And I went, oh. She goes, I couldn't be happier for you. So anyhow, Neil and Bob were tremendous. We lost Neil last year. He passed away. Coach Bob's still kicking, though. He's doing really well. Had heart surgery, though. He had a pretty bad heart attack. Almost didn't make it, but he's back in the circuit. He's doing great. So happy for him.
Awesome.
What a great human being he is. Well, I mean, and since that was before anyone knew who Bob really was. As far as a coach, he was an All-American wrestler at University of Pittsburgh. He was there with Rex Peary and Ed Peary and Hugh Peary and so on.
Yeah.
He knew his wrestling. He was I think state runner-up in Lock Haven High School as a wrestler in high school. But as a human being, he was a 5-time NCAA champion as a human being, and as a father figure. He and Neil were but anywho, and I didn't want to go anywhere else. I had opportunities that people calling, and would you like to transfer to Penn State, Oklahoma State, Iowa, whatever, because I was doing pretty well in college.
Yeah.
No, I was perfectly happy. I was another thing that's different than today. Wish I wrestled today. I got a half scholarship at Clarion. Half scholarship, all 5 years. Was I worth a full scholarship? Possibly.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, with the NIL today.
Yeah, national champ, right?
Yeah, with NIL today.
You kept your half for winning a national title, right?
There are kids today signing contracts for $5 million to go to a college.
Yeah,
not many of them, but that's the kind of money that's out there. $250,000, $500,000 is nothing for an NIL deal now.
So, quick question, and this is Wade Schalles folklore, and I want to know from the horse's mouth if it's true. I heard that you would put an X on the mat at Clarion where you were going to pin your guy before the match started, and you would end up pinning the guy where you put with a piece of tape the X on the mat. Is that just, folklore, or is there any truth to that, or are you going to plead the fifth?
I refuse to respond on the game. It might incriminate me. Yeah, that's true. It was only once, though.
Did it a few times? Did it once?
Just once.
Okay. Well, the story stuck because I went to Clarion my freshman year. I transferred, but I went there my freshman year, and I think you went to something. It was some like either welcoming the freshmen, or they had a bunch of alumni come in, and you came in and to talk with the team and whatnot. But that was one of the stories about the tape. I go, you got to be kidding me. So before the match starts, and even if you think about it, like no matter how good a guy is or how bad a guy is, right? What are you going to put him and drag him all the way over to that piece of tape? But that's funny. That's so it was true.
Well, it was my senior year, and it was the last dual meet of the year. Right before I went to conference, and I moved up 2 weight class. I went from 58 to 77, and I wrestled Hitchcock in the finals of the Pennsylvania Conference. That was the year Floyd won the college division and was outstanding wrestler, and won the university division, was the outstanding wrestler. But he took second in the Pennsylvania Conference. Anyhow, so that was my last match, and I was president of my fraternity, and we had a meeting on Monday nights. We get the whole fraternity get together, and 2 weeks before the final match of the year, one of the brothers raised his hand, in the meeting. I went, "Yeah, Bob. Hey, wait!" Because what we did every spring is we would have a walkathon for cerebral palsy, and our fraternity would go out and get people to pledge. I'll give you a nickel for every mile you walk, or whatever. $1, and whatever we collected at the end, we donate to cerebral palsy. That was our civic do good for during the spring season, spring semester. And one of the brothers in the fraternity said, "Hey, instead of doing the walkathon, why don't we put an X on the mat, and we'll go out and get pledging, and if you could pin the guy on the X, everyone owes us $5 or $2 or whatever they pledge. And instead of a walkathon, we'll do that for cerebral palsy." And I went, no. And then I said, "That's just unheard of." And another fraternity brother raised his hand and said, "Well, wait, that's not necessarily true. Muhammad Ali, what would he do? Down in 7. And in the 7th round, he knocked the guy out." And he said, and if I remember correctly, history says Babe Ruth would get up to the plate, point the bat to right center, and then put it out of the park, right center. So there's a history of athletes doing things like that. So you would not be the first to do something like this. You got to be shit,
Pressure.
But I
Pressure.
knew I felt I could do it. I mean, once you get a cradle, I mean, the guy's helpless. I mean, I could pick him up and carry him to the next county. I mean, because cradles are pretty so deadly. So anyhow, I went, all right, I'll give it a try, And so we kept it a
I'm
secret.
assuming Bob had no idea that this was going on, knowing Coach Bob.
No, none. That was the only thing. If any of you guys in here say that it gets out, Coach Bob will put a stop to this so quick, your head will spin. So right before the match, when the athletic trainer was in a fraternity, he went out and a little piece of white tape, put a little white X on the mat. You couldn't see it. I mean, you could if I said, hey, there's a white X on the mat right over there. And then if you looked, you could see it. But when you're just sitting there and you look out at the mat, you didn't notice it.
Didn't notice it, yeah.
It could have been a crack or a cut in the mat and someone taped it so it wouldn't get bigger. I don't know. So anyhow, I wrestle and I end up getting a cradle. I'm 30 feet away from that mat X. I'm on the other side of the mat from the X.
No way.
So I'm dragging him across, pushing him like a bulldozer across the mat. And, it's like someone turning up a stereo system. As I'm sliding it toward the X, the crowd noise is getting turned up like a stereo system getting turned. Whoa! By the time I got him over there, the place is going crazy. And I jack him up on his shoulders, and his back slid across the tape. And athletic tape doesn't stick to a mat real well. Not like mat tape does.
Right.
So when you do that with the hand, it rolls up.
Sure.
Mat tape. And the referee slapped the mat. My opponent got up, and the tape had stuck to the back of his neck.
Oh my God.
So now it's funnier than hell. He's walking off the mat with the X stuck to his neck.
Oh my God.
And now I didn't know this, but during the match, Jack Davis, who was then ultimately became the coach at Clarion, elbowed Coach Bob. He was one of our teammates, and went. And he whispers in Bub's ear and points to the X, and Bub stands up, walks to the edge of the mat. I didn't see any of this. And they said he walked to the mat and looked at him. And turned and walked and sat back down again,
Well, they had to be wondering, what is Wade doing dragging this dude across the mat?
Right.
Like, who does that and why, right?
I didn't, unbeknown to me, Coach Bob had it set up with the announcer, Charlie Slavage, that he was going to make an announcement. No one in the history of the sport has ever reached a 100-pin milestone. And so referee raised my hand, and Bub's right there. And I went, oh shit. He grabbed my arm and said, stay here. Okay. I'm ready to get my butt chewed, and Charlie goes, ladies and gentlemen, an NCAA record has just been created. No one in the history of the sport has ever won, blah, 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 talked about my 100th collegiate pin. I get a standing ovation, and while they're cheering, Bub's going, what the hell is that X doing on the mat? And I went, what X, coach?
What X?
He says, damn well what X. And when he says hell and damn in the same paragraph, ooh, that's a no-no for Coach Bob. You are in the doghouse.
Oh yeah.
Bob, even Bob doesn't even know the 4-letter words exist.
Right. Right.
And he and Neil were, straight. Of course, that's not necessarily true, but anyhow, he was pissed. And he said, and I said, what X, coach? He goes, damn well what X, that one is right. Coach, I don't see an X. Do you see an X? His face was getting red. He's, because he couldn't find the X.
Right. Because it's on the kid's neck.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
that was my last dual meet in Tippin Gymnasium at Clarion against Lockhaven. And I apologize.
That's an awesome story. That is an awesome
I apologize to the wrestler afterwards, because I realized, to point to the right center field, knock the ball out, you're not making fun of anybody.
Yeah.
To pin someone on an ex is well, you know what it is. And
Well,
I,
yeah. And at the same token, you're a kid for all intents and purposes, and it was for a good cause.
yeah,
You raised money.
yeah, I've seen him a couple times since then, and I don't want to say he was traumatized, but I think now it's a joke that he was not, because anytime his friends would see him, hey, there's Mr. 100,
Mr. 100.
so
Oh,
he took a beating after that, but and we're good friends. I still to this day feel badly about it.
yeah.
I'm not that kind of person anymore. That I guess I was
Sure.
back then. I did,
Sure.
my mother went, no, that was not not the right thing to do, Wade.
Yeah.
And that was when
You
my
live and
mother
you
was
learn.
that was a spanking. I mean, when I disappointed her, I mean that was I'd rather her spank me
Yeah.
than to tell me she was disappointed in me.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. I
that's my
understand.
first problem was if he said he was disappointed, that was an ass kicking.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was
You
no
let
extra
somebody down
friends.
that
There was no,
you love and respect.
set bench for 2 weeks or anything like that. Just wait, I'm disappointed in you. You're a better person than that.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so that was the story of the X on the mat and for my 100th pin.
Yeah. Well, wait, we're kind of at our time here. I really appreciate you coming back on and sharing that. And I'm glad I got to hear that story of the ex, because it was, I'm like, if I ever see Wade Schalles or talk to him, I got to ask him about that, because that story, when it was told when I was a freshman, when I went to Clarion. And so, but man, what an incredible wrestler career, especially starting as late as you did. Not everybody could do that. And obviously, you know, just natural ability and talent.
Mhm.
And you are the original funk master, the godfather of funk,
Well,
right?
we went from funk or garbage wrestling to, I said, I'm tired of this. It's funk
Yeah.
wrestling. It's funky. People say I
Yeah.
was funky. So I went, yeah,
Yeah.
we could get rid of that junk and call it funky. So after about 3 years of funky, I went, I want to get rid of the E part and just call it funk. That's it. It's
Yeah.
funk wrestling. I elevated it to funk wrestler. And ever since then, today, where you see that's funk wrestling. And that funk
Yeah.
wrestling is nothing but a wide open dive between, over top, underneath. What the hell was
Yeah.
that? That was funk wrestling. And,
Yeah.
and somewhere along the line, I got labeled, the father of funk. And I got other names too. Asshole, a jerk. No,
I,
opinionated is definitely an adjective they use when you say
that's all right.
shallows.
Listen, we're all different, man. And I appreciate you coming on. I really do. And stay well. And, you know, maybe somewhere down the road, I can have you on again and we could talk about some other topics in the sport, which, I'm sure you have different ideas.
Oh,
And,
absolutely. That would be a
you
lot
know,
of fun.
but no, I'd love to have you on again. And so be well. And thanks again, Wade. I appreciate you.
And I've added to funk now. It's camouflaged funk. That's the next
Camouflage
level.
funk.
That's the next level of the development of garbage, funky, funk, camouflage funk, which is even more. What the hell was that? You don't know what it was camouflage, and all of a sudden he's on top.
Hey,
So
any good jokes you have to end us here?
anyway,
Good jokes?
oh, jokes. Geez. Why do the French prefer to eat snails?
No clue.
Because they hate fast food.
Wade, that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible.
All right.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you, man.
All right.
Be
Thanks.
well. Okay. Take care now. Bye-bye.
This ain't no regular thing. I came for the ring, you know what I mean. I shoot my shot and it's clean. This is my city, yeah, this is my team.
Music licensing reimagined.
Play with all of my life.